Greetings, you're listening to Guiding Stars Evolutionary Astrology Radio. This is your host, Kristin Fontana. Guiding Stars is an interactive, soul-centered astrology talk show using the symbolic language of evolutionary astrology to enlighten and empower you on this journey. We are moving through a new series here with SΥmõn Vorster from Sweden, and Simon and I started in January looking at Saturn through the houses and signs. And we are at our second stop with Saturn and Taurus, or Saturn in the second house. So if you have this natal signature or know anybody who does, you're going to be finding this hour or so very interesting. I just like to welcome Simon back to Guiding Stars. Welcome back, Simon.
Thanks very much, Kristin. Deeply appreciated as always, and our journey as we explore astrology together.
Yeah, I love it. So we are at the tail end of February. We're going to try and look at Saturn in each sign per month. We'll be back the end of March and moving forward once a month as best we can throughout 2019. It's a big year of Saturn energy spilling into 2020, right, with Pluto in Capricorn, Saturn in Capricorn, and that giant stellium that's going to be occurring in January of 2020. So Simon thought it would be ideal and appropriate to discuss this archetype all year.
Yeah.
Can't get enough of Saturn and Capricorn.
Yeah, it's definitely one of those connections that I think we can all benefit from by understanding our Capricorn in our charts and our Saturn in our charts. So I was like, yep, you're right. This is a great way to spend the whole year doing this.
So Saturn and Taurus, if you have Saturn and Taurus in particular, not necessarily the second house if it's in a different sign, but for those of you who have Saturn and Taurus, you've been receiving probably some nice support from Pluto and Saturn in Capricorn. These are both earth signs, very compatible, although Uranus is going to re-enter Taurus soon. So maybe Uranus is going to be coming over your Saturn. That's going to be pretty life-changing. So it's so incredible to have astrology in our lives, just to be able to guide us, to help validate our realities, to support us through those chutes and tunnels and passageways that we all need to make it through at different points in our evolution. So I'm really excited to be going on this journey with you, Simon. And so, anywhere you want to start here.
I felt like what would be a really good thing to do is just talk a little bit about, what does the second house archetype look like? What is the essence of it from an evolutionary astrology perspective? I think when Saturn, or should I say, when you're looking at Taurus and you're looking at the second house, and of course the inner side of Venus, from an evolutionary perspective, it's about the fundamental need for survival. It's survival in its most purest essence, the core of the archetype, and it's simply representing that in each thing that exists within this plane, including us, there has to be something that sustains our existence. And so Taurus in the second house reflects this archetypal principle. And when you look at life in itself, you can actually see how incredibly important this archetype is. If we begin to develop an extra layer on top, or the next layer on top of the survival archetype or the survival essence, you can see that it becomes individual, where each organism or plant or human being has individual needs, and those individual needs will correspond to the connection of their own ecosystem. And so, you can see how we start to expand a little bit more and really begin to grasp the depths of the second house archetype, or Taurus. And from there, more in a human perspective, the human psychology, this is where we then assign certain values. And this is one of the things that I I generally get slightly disturbed by, but it's only me being this way, that when I hear a lot of astrology and I hear a lot about astrology in the second house, it's always about values. And I feel like we're missing the point when it comes to, or not missing the point, but missing something really deep about understanding in the second house, that yes, it is about values, but it's not values in the sense that that's what it's about. It's really understanding the essential needs of the individual or of a specific environment or an organism within the environment. And it's at that point that we can actually get to really understand even deeper layers of what Taurus represents, or the second house, especially when we're trying to analyze the karmic signature in our own chart and what those types of themes can be like. So that kind of just a side note there on Taurus. At the human level, it's about values and what we value, because it's what we value becomes from a place of, this is essential for us, and that essentialness is established from a deep need for security rooted in survival. So that's kind of the second house archetype, broken down into the different layers. I don't know if there's anything else that you want to add to that process.
Essential needs is really how we understand what we need, of course, to survive, but what we need in our relationships, our essential needs in every area of our life. So it's important to understand what planets are in that house, what rules the second house, what sign is on that cusp, for you to know what you need, not just for survival. Your sexual needs are also included.
Sure.
In that sector of the chart, your basic needs as a physical human being, body, everything that governs the senses, right? How we listen, what we hear, how we feel about things, all through our sensory bodies, are connected to this Taurian archetype, which of course are sensual needs. Anything that allows us to feel good in the body is very Venus. It's not Neptune, which is that higher octave, but Venus, it's how we feel on earth in these forms, as a soul in this form. What do I need on every basic primal level, the second house? And so we are going to express more about how this archetype, the second house archetype, manifests through the Saturn signature as we make our way through the hour here. But I feel like it's important to remember too that this Saturn function anywhere, but in particular here in Taurus or the second house, that Saturn in Taurus is going to condition every other planet in your chart. So if you have Saturn in Taurus, it's like wrapping every other planet with that energy. This need to know what those essential needs are, where your frontline survival is going to be first and foremost, and across the board. It could be too having past lives where you were living on very little, and so you sort of come into this life with this consciousness that you're always trying to save just in case, or save for a rainy day, and never not worrying about that, I would say. Always worrying about that in some cases, depending on your stage of evolution, of course, is part of that. But definitely people that can live on very little, but also don't want to spend very much because their survival is always, at the back of their mind. So just a couple little pieces of this archetype. I mean, I know plenty of people with strong second houses in general that I know a handful of people that don't make a lot of money, yet they have more money than most people. Do you understand? Like they're constantly in this sort of mindset of scarcity and being able to live on a shoestring budget. It's that kind of phenomenon. But it's not always that way. Like if you're listening and you have Saturn in your second house and you're thinking, oh my gosh, am I going to have to work this hard or so hard my entire life and never have a break or never have that feeling that I have enough? And it's not necessarily true. We're going to show you some examples of how there are people that have been uber successful with Saturn in the second house. And it's all about how you understand your resources, right, Simon? It's like how you work with your resources and and to not feel limited by Earth when it comes to how you manifest resources. That's another really important teaching with this Saturn placement.
It's true. And, like to touch on the understanding of Taurus, when you begin to synthesize it with Saturn being there, when we're looking at essential needs, there is a necessity, I feel, with people with Saturn in the second house to experience a reality where you're becoming attuned to the different states that Taurus has. So in its shadow state, Taurus will deeply represent a feeling of intense scarcity. And that leads to I need to hold on to everything that I have, because when it gets taken away from me, that feeling of not having can be deeply traumatizing, and that's why you'll notice that with the Taurus archetype in general, that the experience of hoarding, the experience of needing to make sure that I've got a lot of foundational, structural, material things around me, actually on some level creates a feeling of security for people, because they can actually feel like there's something like there that they can touch, and
like hoarding, right? Hoarding.
Precisely. It's almost like feeling as if there's material stuff around them. It's like, okay, cool. I can see that I have material things around me, so therefore I'm feeling safe in that area. It's a really interesting psychological thing to understand about the nature of Taurus, and how having things is a representation of that sense of security, because it's the absence of material things that creates that psychological state of, I'm there's nothing around me, which is the paradox of the Taurus chart. Because and this is, with somebody that's got Saturn in the second house Taurus, you're going to be going through life where part of your Saturnian work is becoming emotionally structured and stable in yourself, and grounded in the way that your choices and decision making is made. But it also will reflect at some point that need to become emotionally free from the fear of scarcity, and recognizing that at the truest, or not the truest, but the deepest trusting level of Taurus is the realization that you'll be given everything that you need for your individual path, and that there's this teaching about giving as a way of giving to yourself. So giving out, and trusting that as you give out abundance, it returns back to you through the polarity of Scorpio, which is that process of shared resources. The more you have, the more you give, and that always comes back to you in some way, because you're almost like reinforcing to yourself that you trust in the nature and the creative principle of your soul, and that it will provide you with the abundance that is necessary for when a situation comes about. And I know I don't have Saturn there at the moment. However, Neptune is transiting my second house, and that's one of the archetypes where you just are in a complete surrender state of going, okay, here's the situation's writing, and I've just got to trust these impulses. Whereas with Saturn, it's a little bit more solid in that process. Your choices do need to reflect a ongoing emotional sort of, again, like work in establishing strong security within inside of yourself. So it might even be that part of your life is about getting a level of competence and value that then you bring to, like, you're going to apply for a job as an example, and one of the reasons why you get the job is because you had a certain level of value that you were able to offer the company, and the way that you got that value was through a course that you took, right? You chose Saturn to invest in yourself, and over time, Saturn, that led to a sense of value that you could now contribute. And that value led to you giving abundance back to yourself, which is ultimately what we're learning about here with Taurus, is how do we give abundance to ourselves, and then by extension to other people.
Isn't it amazing how we think about Saturn and Taurus, or the second, and it can run the gamut of renouncing all possessions, right? And having this monastic life, or living in an ashram,
yeah,
to the hoarder. And we
Right.
talk about the shadow, that is the shadow of it, the opposite about, what do we do to feel secure? Especially with Saturn and Taurus or the second house. Saturn as an archetype does connect to our security, but you put it in Taurus and it becomes material, right? It becomes physical, more about the physical world to feel secure, the roof over your head, etc. And when we look to the chakras in terms of what planets rule what chakra, Saturn rules the outer ring of the root chakra. So if you imagine at the very base of the spine, first chakra, the root chakra, is ruled by Pluto, of course, hence the root, or your soul. There's an energy that emanates from your root chakra, which is Uranus. Uranius, your soul's vibration. And then Saturn is the casing that wraps around the root chakra to protect you. The energy that protects you, that allows you to feel secure. And so this Saturnian energy, wherever your Saturn is in your chart, your root chakra is wrapped with that energy to protect you. And so that we have to feel secure before we're ever going to travel up those chakras, right? To feel safe enough in our root, supported, secured, and secure in our world and our environment, before we're going to feel like we have the freedom that we feel at the navel chakra to actualize ourselves in somewhere after it. So that base, that foundation, those bottom lines, the foundation of our life is Saturn and Taurus, like pouring a foundation of your home. That foundation where your feet stand, where you lay at night, has got to be secure for Saturn and Taurus or the second house before they do anything.
Yeah, that's completely true. And I think that, with Saturn in the second house, or maybe even Saturn in any earth signs, this is even truer, because you'll notice, well, at least I've noticed that when you look at astrology charts and you see Saturn in Taurus or Saturn in the second house or Saturn in Virgo, there's always a lot of, there's like a necessity for that. There's like a groundedness that needs to be a part of the choice making and practicality within your journey. And especially with Saturn being the one that, in practical terms, Saturn is the protection, is the ability to understand your own personal sense of boundaries. And of course, if you're, with Saturn in the second house or in Taurus, most likely your early life imprinting, you're going to have one person in your home is going to have to show up as the Saturn figure, which becomes the way that you identify discipline through understanding what's correct and what's not correct through the social norms. You'll get conditioned by the circumstances that are around you. So you might incarnate a dad that's, super into working a lot, and he's doing it because his motivations are to create a stability within the home. Or Saturn in the second house shows up as dad also being the same way. He works a lot, but he earns a lot of money and he likes that comfortable lifestyle, and you kind of live within that realm, and you get to know what certain things are like you talked about with Taurus being very much linked with the material feeling of things, and then you get the other side of the coin where you show up and, your family dynamic is that dad and mom don't really have good jobs, in the sense that they don't bring any financial sort of abundance into the home, but they've got these deeper spiritual principles where the Saturn in Taurus or second house shows up as the importance to acknowledge and hold strong values, and that those strong values create good character, and that good character creates a human being that can interact socially in the world and be respected, and that is an establishment of how you're in this place, quote, values are actually instilled within yourself, and that's part of your own personal soul journey. So there's actually quite a huge wide spectrum of how Saturn in the second house can show up as a conditioning field for your at your youth and how you're growing into the mold of what will eventually become the boundaries that you will need to break down, so that you can step into your own developing boundaries for your own soul, which is essentially how I interpret the process from your first Saturn return up until Uranus opposition, that path of individuation. So you'll notice that with this symbolism in your chart, you will tend to be very sensitive towards needing to work through threads of scarcity within yourself, threads of recognizing where abundance can be invested into things that will eventually provide you with something that's sustainable. I mean, we talk a lot about values with Taurus, but it's also about sustainability. And so part of your decision making as you get into your adulthood, as part of your Saturn practical choice making, developing strong safety within yourself, becoming grounded, and into your adulthood, is the realization of what is essential in your life and what things are going to be sustainable in your life. And you might deal with those themes throughout your adulthood as a way to really get connected with the essence of Taurus through the lens of Saturn, which is not like Jupiter. It's not expansive. It's not like, hey, yes, inheritance. It's more along the lines of you're going to put in some long hours to eventually at some point become an authoritarian in this area, where
Yes.
people seek your guidance.
Yes, definitely. While you were talking too, I just had this visual because I was thinking, Taurus is very much a fixed archetype, obviously. Second house Taurus fixed. And I was just visualizing this meditator with his or her, bum on the ground, right, in lotus position, being able to sit there for hours and hours, right? It's incredible. Or those the monks that used to make those sand mandalas, right?
Yes.
Just for hours and hours, and that's another perfect example of that energy,
right?
And I just continue to have charts kind of flowing into my mind, remembering different people with the signature, and incredible. I know a few of literally just having the simplest of existence in terms of not spending money on anything. They're not even allowing themselves maybe to go out for a latte or something.
Sure.
They cost so much. And so having this appearance of lack or not having a lot, and then literally discovering that, they have so much just in the bank, but they're not allowing themselves to enjoy what they're earning either. Because the stress of spending outweighs the joy of allowing them to have that experience. All they can think of is what's coming out of the bank account versus how much they might enjoy that pleasure of whatever it is that,
Absolutely. And, again, with, you can have Uranus in the second house, and there could be subconscious memories of trauma that was related to those things. And when we look at Saturn, it still can have a similar theme to it, but it's generally where somebody showed up in their early life environment, at least from my point of view and what I've seen, where the model of the Taurus archetype was shaped by the behavior structure of a parent or somebody that this person was raised by, or that had a lot of was exposed to a lot of time, and so those kind of values or models were imprinted. And especially with the Taurus archetype, there can be a lot of anxiety around safety, survival. Like, this is, when I was growing up, my mom and dad had to work like 12 hours to get these types of things, and we ate this food. Now I'm 35 years old. I've got loads of money in my bank account, but I really only got that because I didn't want them to, I didn't want to live like them. So I got my PhD, I got all this, I got all these things. I'm 36 years old, and I don't know what to do with my life. And I'm like, yeah, this is completely the natural product of how not only astrology can be deeply liberating for people to realize this is something that would happen if Uranus transits your Saturn, by the way, where you all of a sudden
Oh,
realize that
definitely.
this action or this choice making that you were doing in your life was actually just in a response mechanism to a trauma that you were having. And with Taurus, it can literally be that, especially with Saturn, you can feel like how you were raised and what you wanted to have in your own life, you don't want the same thing. And so you do the complete opposite, which in essence is still, it's just polarizing it.
I wanted to share too, for those people that have Saturn and Taurus and we're panicking a little when I spoke about Uranus entering the sign of Taurus. I've panicked a little over the years when I saw Uranus coming, because I do have a couple planets in Capricorn, and I have a 10th house moon in Aries. So, of course, I just came through a Uranus transit, and anybody who's got Saturn in Taurus or or Earth in their chart, and they've got a Uranus transit coming, especially the Capricorn energy connected to Saturn, is we want to be able to feel in control of our life in some way. Like nobody
Right.
likes the unexpected when it's not good news, right?
Mm-hmm.
Nobody
Mm-hmm.
wants all of what you've built to just, be lost in a hurricane or a tidal wave. Nobody wants that. An earthquake is very Uranian. And so it can create a lot of anticipatory anxiety, when you know something is coming. But what I would like to offer here, and we going back to the root chakra, because everything that we have here on earth is temporary. What is not temporary is our soul and our connection to what created us, and our connection to the souls of those that we love. And that is the higher octave of Venus, the ruler of Taurus, being Neptune. That nice little sextile from the 2nd house to the 12th house. So it's important to always remember that. And at the root chakra, we've got that the Saturn casing on the outside. Uranus rules that middle layer. Uranus is your vibration, your vibratory nature that emanates from your soul. It's never changing because it's your fingerprint, it's your essence, but it's evolving at the same time. We're all evolving and transforming through time, but there is still that initial frequency that is Uranus. It's your own personal frequency that is rooted in your nature, your natural design, that can be contained by that Saturn. It can be snuffing it out in some way or dimming down your light. And so with Uranus coming through a transit to your Saturn, it can have a way of, like Jeffrey used to say, the jackhammer to cement. It can chip away at all of the weight that you've collected, the gravity, the unwanted, and also the outer casing that supports our root chakra can be far thicker than we need. We all want to protect ourselves in some way, but there's a way to also thin down that outer ring, so more of your energy, more of that Uranian vibration can be expressed and be received by others. And so I don't want, I've just lived through some pretty major Uranus transits, making all sorts of aspects, and got an intimate touch with the nature of this energy. And it has had a way of deconditioning me further. And it forces us to not attach to the physical, to the material, but to spend more time, Saturn, on our inner relationship to ourself. Of course, being in Taurus here, if you have the signature, how important and the time that you need for yourself to be grounded. That is going to be essential now through that transit. If Saturn and Taurus is in the earlier degrees, you're going to be experiencing this transit very soon. So I didn't mean to digress there, but think about how liberating it will feel to shake off that more of that outer casing or that outer ring that is not allowing the full pulse of your nature to be expressed. And that will allow you to feel more free and less weighted down by worry and whatever else you feel burdened by, seen with that Saturn placement.
Yeah, I liked what you shared there, by the way. I feel like it's a great segue into a piece of imagery that I wanted to share with everybody, because I think it's really important. This is just a little bit about Saturn in itself, and I feel like just talking about Saturn a little bit as we go through these signs, we can become emotionally connected to the actual experience of Saturn itself and what it's really representing to us. Because a lot of the time, or not a lot of the time, almost 80% of the time, we talk about Saturn as a field of career or life direction, or it's, you know, restriction, or all the classic sort of astrology language. But there's a part of it that I feel needs to be brought back, which is the feminine principle that is Saturn, the inherited essence of its actual nature, and how it actually operates within our consciousness, and how it essentially establishes the framework for our reality. And from that point, we can actually begin to not only begin processing Saturn transits, especially when it's Uranian. I feel like when a Uranian transit comes through us, a lot of the time we get immensely confused or uncomfortable with what is actually awakening us. And it's mostly because the Uranian transit brings a lot more awareness to the situation than what we can process emotionally in the moment with Saturn. So it kind of needs to evolve or like unfold over time. We need to be processing over time what the Uranian transit was really bringing us. And this picture over here, this imagery, this is a fossil that I looked on the internet. I wanted to get one that had the best resolution, but you can just go onto the internet and type in fossils and look at the shaping of what fossils are, because it is the Saturn archetype, because the word crystallization, emotional crystallization, is, or the structural forming of something is Saturn. It is the density of particles and molecules that form into something that eventually becomes solid, and so therefore we have a physical plane. And each of these, can you see over here that there's this line that sits over there, and then I'll actually draw it like this. There's a line that sits over there, and then there's a line that sits over there, and then there's a line that sits over there. Now, notice how when you look at an actual analog clock, you'll notice that will look like a clock face. You'll see that we have this 11 o'clock position, this 10 o'clock position, this 9 o'clock position, this 8 o'clock position. What we're looking at here is the boundaries, Saturn, that reflect the space in between this. This is the sextile to Neptune. So we are looking at time frames in which experiences are held. So just as we're having this this conversation today, within a time frame, and within that time frame, in other words, boundaries, we're experiencing and expressing consciousness within it. And over time, Capricorn reflecting time, we're seeing the development or the grounding of experiences. So within our emotional archaeology, which is the layering of our emotional experiences, we all have memories linked with exactly that, experiences. And where we have Saturn in our chart will specifically correlate to those encased experiences that we carry in our emotional archaeology. So with Saturn in the second house in Taurus, these are core experiences that are linked with scarcity, with survival, with abundance, what it's like to abundant, and we're learning about those processes as well. And you can see that this is very much in stone. It's in history. It's there. It's established. It's grounded into reality. It's now formed, which is why Saturn will also be deeply connected with the law of manifestation. In other words, manifesting the nature of our soul's purpose through time, right? This is essentially how we're experiencing this. And why I found it so beautiful to talk about the Uranian thing is because when we do go through a Uranian experience, and I feel like Saturn and Uranus are very intimately connected in the process of individual awakening, a path to awakening, if we aren't able to actually have a strong structure in place, if our Saturn is not developed enough, i.e., if we haven't actually done the shadow of Saturn and we don't know how to bring back our own sort of authority back to ourselves, we're always going to blame something outside of ourselves. So a tendency with second house Saturn dynamics is to always feel like you don't have enough money, and so therefore it's other people that are causing that to you, or it's the job that's not giving you that, or it's always looking outside for where the issue is, versus you seeing responsibility for yourself to establish a deeper, more practical, stronger connection to the essence of your own essential needs. And from that point, then beginning to healthily grow and stabilize the structure that is essentially needed there. And it's important that when you work with Saturn in your life, that you recognize the principles of Saturn. It's not about like putting 100 hours in one day and then, you know, being successful or trying to achieve something. It's actually slow, progressive change over time. So it's like, you know, if you want to build something, like let's say, for instance, you want to build a YouTube channel, you know, or you aspire to be an astrologer. One of the greatest, deepest issues is that when you start out as somebody that wants to pursue their dreams as an astrologer or build a YouTube channel, is that you want that instant accreditation right now. And Saturn's actually inviting a process of a routine in place, as an example, right? The trine to Virgo from Capricorn, that over time establishes a foundation of experiences that then leads to something that has become crystallized and formed. So wherever we have Saturn in our chart, this is an ongoing way that we can actually healthily form an attitude and then into habit that leads to then eventually a routine that manifests something that's real for you, right? And it all begins with working with your shadow Saturn, realizing where you unconsciously project the dynamics in your chart that are about other people needing to take responsibility for something that's in yourself, and then eventually pulling that back to you and realizing your own power, your own sovereignty, and then choosing choices consciously that leads to something that will eventually, you know, bring you wherever it is. And I think, you know, just jumping, I don't know if you feel that you're ready to go into the chart example, but I know that with our chart example of Yogananda, it's a really great way to actually see that happen in his life, the materialization of the work that he did.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I'm happy to. Let's move over. Move into this chart.
Okay. I mean, is there anything that you wanted to add to what I was sharing over there?
Oh, I just loved it all. I love the image. Just that, you know, this second house, Saturn and Taurus is just very slow. It's plodding, it's patient, deliberate, and it isn't in a hurry. It doesn't want to be in a hurry. It feels better when it's just moving, you know, like the tortoise, essentially, versus the hare. Remember who wins? The tortoise does. And so, yeah, I just loved it. I was just taking it all in. And it's true, this interface between Saturn and Aquarius. Saturn is about our past, all the memories of our past.
Mm-hmm.
And when we repress the past because we're afraid of what we see, there's a song, I can't remember the name of it, but it's like, are there pages where you're afraid to look? You know, there are pages for all of us where we're afraid to look, to go back to them because of all the emotion that is activated and ignited in us. And yet we need to go back into those memories if we have not worked all the way through them in order to put them to rest.
Sure.
And as you interface with the Uranian archetype and you walk through a door, I see all these lines like you're walking through a door with each step. And I know with this recent Uranus transit has been making massive aspects in my chart that I experienced myself walking through a door many times. There were so many doors. And once you get through a door, you can't unwalk through it. So once you've walked into that room, or you've walked into that memory, or you've walked into an experience, you can't just walk back out and ignore that fact. You've got to continue moving forward. And so I like this image in terms of just knowing that there are countless doors for us to walk through, and there's always a space to work within what we've entered. And in time, we can do that when we dedicate and stay determined. It's very Capricorn word, determination. And so,
Exactly.
yeah, I wanted to thank you for that. And wherever your Saturn is, an area of your life, if you stay determined, you can experience a harvest, a graduation, a summiting, things of that nature. And there's nothing that feels better than when you've worked incredibly hard for something over time, to experience some sort of victory or, the result of that hard work versus having something just handed to you. Because it's sustainable then. You've built something. It's not some fly-by-night thing that's happened. You've created it. And it just made me think of, even doing a chart for a woman who was married to someone who was incredibly wealthy and having Saturn and Taurus or the second. And I said, I bet, you've still got to work in case everything goes to hell in a handbag. You're okay. You're covered. She still didn't feel secure knowing, even being married to a millionaire. She did not feel safe. She needed to kind of earn her own keep and her own bank account. So
That's actually an important point that you made there, by the way, because Taurus, and we didn't even actually speak about it, and I can't believe it, but Taurus actually correlates to the archetype of self-reliance. So,
totally.
right?
Right. And her need to not be dependent on his wealth or her own survival. And so anybody who has this signature and you're feeling like, hey, there's something wrong with me. Why can't I just be okay with this? Well, I know you don't think there's anything wrong with you because you know that you just need to take care of yourself. And when you know that you can take care of yourself, all is well in the world.
Yeah, that's I
There's no
actually
dependency.
completely. I think that's a really, really big point to make, to be honest, with people that have got Saturn in the second house of Taurus. The realization that this is also a lifetime of self-sustainability, and that part of your Saturn work is to realize that you are able to be abundant within yourself. I mean, and that's why a lot of situations might actually come your way where you realize that sustainability and self-sustainability are not necessarily lessons, but experiences that develop that very strong foundation under your feet that allows you to feel that, that sense of stability. That is,
Right.
that's actually there.
The very last thing the souls with this signature want to feel is a dependency on anybody. It's just the very last thing. So I realized recently, David did this wonderful Evolutionary States webinar and used Yogananda's chart going all through the stages of evolution, of course, and what that looks like. Ari and I mentioned his chart in our Chiron in the first house in Aries, but it's a wonderful teaching platform. So I'm going to share it here with Saturn in the second house, because there's this chapter in Autobiography of a Yogi where it's called Two Penniless Boys in Vrindavan, and it's chapter 11. It's worth reading if people have this book. Anyway, Yogananda's older brother is saying to him, it served you right if father disinherited you. When Yogananda came into a family that had money, Saturn in the second, he came into a family who had money, but you can see this with Moon and Leo in the 12th, trining Mercury and Venus, right in the 4th. There's this energy around having more, 5th house sun, Capricorn. And so he says, how foolishly you are throwing away your life. And so his older brother was giving him this sermon, of sorts. And he says, well, Ananta, who's his brother, I seek my inheritance from the Heavenly Father. And the brother says, money first, God can come later. Who knows, life may be too long. And Yogananda says, God first, money is his slave. Who can tell, life may be too short. So, anyway, he decides that he wants to give Yogananda a test and to send he and his friend to some strange city without a penny to see if they can lean on God, to manifest whatever they need to feed themselves and to get back on the train. He gets them a one ticket, a train ticket one way into a strange city.
Okay.
And so anyway, you can see here with Saturn in the second house, right, trining Pluto and Neptune, that, you know, Yogananda has total trust, Pluto, that God, and Neptune here, that God will provide what they need for them. And no sooner do they get on this train that someone, you know, spots it or looks at them as potentially two young boys trying to run away from the family, and immediately wants to scoop them up and take care of them. So they get off the train, and the person, the chap that was noticing them, that they probably needed a meal or something, even though they didn't look poor in any way, he could just tell they were up to something, literally takes them to lunch at this very lavish home where royalty was supposed to attend but couldn't. So here they sit in this palace of sorts, being fed, you know, by these total strangers who are providing this meal. And I mean, step by step, you know, he, of course, at every step, he's given everything he needs, because God is, you know, God first, right? Money second. God is answering his wishes and his prayers in those moments. And so anyway, using God as his compass. So you can see this as, it's a wonderful story, so I don't want to spoil the whole thing. If people want to read it on their own, I invite you to do that. I just had so many good laughs rereading that again. And looking here at a chart of somebody very evolved, you know, so much of Saturn in the second house, Saturn in Taurus, it is about trust, that you are not alone. You can manifest things far outside your own realm of reality and even your own imagination. The things that were manifesting for these boys on this trip were far beyond what they thought could happen. Maybe not Yogananda. He probably had an idea of what could happen.
Yeah.
But his friend that was very upset because he was starving at the very thought they wouldn't eat for 24 hours, you know. And so there's a faith in place as well. And anyway, I just wanted to show this and look at the Saturn in Taurus, Saturn in Libra, sextiling Venus, which rules Libra, really always having what he needs at every turn, right?
Yeah.
Right there in the chart. So I love this story. Wanted to share that.
It's true. And his North Node also in Taurus as well in the 9th house. You could see that just in that story, he needed to establish his own point of view that was very much about his own value, his own need, his own sense of it's like with the North Node in Taurus over there in the 9th house, it emphasizes on some degree the Saturn in the second, because there is the repeating theme of Taurus, second house, Venus. His North Node's ruled by Venus, his Saturn's ruled by Venus. There's something around his own inner dialogue with himself that was about a self-sustainable belief system. So he would talk to his brother in this story, like you're sharing, and give an opposing view to what his brother was sharing. And it was essential for him, I think, to actually empower himself in acknowledging his own internal dialogue and his own way of relating to life versus maybe taking on the values or the ideals of other people, the beliefs of other people.
Yeah, I just thought of something too that's very important for this story, is that they were not allowed to beg for money or to tell anybody about their circumstance. Like, hey, my brother is, putting me up to this test. That was part of this. So it speaks further into this faith that was so important, right? Mm-hmm. For this trust. But a North Node in the 9th, and Taurus, ruler being that Venus in Sag, which sextiles is Saturn. And, even his friend was calling this initial gift and it just landed in their lap to be sort of like a beginner's luck or first time luck experience, but things continue to occur. And even his brother said, if you come back without begging or asking for a penny from anybody and make it on the train back, I will become your disciple. His older brother said that because he thought it would just be impossible to do. So I feel like it's such an important message for anyone with this signature to, go beyond, right? For the frog to leave the well,
Yeah.
right? That we talk about.
That's what I was going to
And
ask you earlier was about the nature of the frog in the well type of psychology with Saturn in the second house.
what about it?
Just what you mentioned there. That's with Saturn, to actually jump out of the fear of being in that state or having that state. Saturn, wants you to kind of break that like you were talking about, that outer definition around the root chakra, where you can be very encapsulated by the fear of not having enough, that you stay in one place and then along comes an eighth house transit, and all of a sudden the structure starts to get shaken up because Scorpio is asking you to evolve, and you need to jump out of the well and see and broaden your horizons, basically. And it's an important message with Saturn in the second house to not find yourself becoming too comfortable.
Yeah. Oh, I want to share. I totally agree. I want to share this beautiful passage too, between, you think about Venus and
Yep.
Neptune. They are siblings. And Venus obviously is a lower octave ruler of Taurus, Neptune being a higher octave ruler of Pisces. And in this case, he's got this Saturn-Neptune trine, and he says to his brother, I am conscious of my dependence on God. Words are cheap, the brother says. Life has shielded you thus far. Remembering he was born into a family that had money, even with Saturn in the second. What a plight if you were forced to look at the invisible hand for your food and shelter. You would soon be begging on the streets. And Yogananda said, never. I would not put faith in passers-by rather than in God. He can devise for his devotee 1,000 resources besides the begging bowl. And so he was trying to teach his brother that, obviously he doesn't need anything on earth, or, he needs to look only to God to supply everything for him. Right? So that leaping outside the well in this case. Look at here too with that Virgo, 0 Virgo rising with that moon and Leo just above it, and this transition from having everything when he's born, right, moon and Leo, an inheritance, to where his life led following with that. So anyway, I just love the story.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so true, and you can see that he already came into this lifetime with the deep intention to transform and transmute, because of the Uranus in the third house conjunct the South Node in Scorpio. He definitely he didn't come into this lifetime with to continue the same pattern. There was going to be huge changes that were going to take place for him.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Definitely. And remembering too that his wishes for his next life would to be have a life of solitude, or with close friends, disciples in the Himalayas in India. So in his next life, everything will be denounced. Simple in the mountains. Look at that 10th house, Pluto, Neptune, Gemini, in India again. So, all right, we should probably jump to another chart here, unless you have anything else to say, and we can move to the one that you've got.
Sure. So this chart over here is interesting as well, because it's you got Saturn in Leo in the second house, and this is a person that actually established I think it was in 2011, established a huge Facebook page that was essentially, talking or trying to promote Saturn in Leo, promoting alternative news, but not alternative news in the sense of like, oh, there's, extraterrestrials. It's more along the lines of realizing that within our society, Chiron conjunct the South Node in the 10th house, that the values and the direction and the nature of our world is deeply repressed, and there's a lot of things that are wrong with it, and so and also not wanting to actually go into the public eye and continue working in that direction, established this online community. And it's at the moment is about 3.5 million people that follow this this platform on Facebook, and it just literally promotes different types of people that create content. So people that and every possible category that you can think of is on this actual website and on this platform. And it essentially just hosts loads and loads of people that are self-actualizing, that have got something valuable that's in alignment with this person's truth, this person's vision. You can see the Saturn trining the Sun and Mars and Neptune all in the 6th house there. It is their work. And it's also non-profit, if I'm not mistaken. So it's registered as a non-profit organization. So a large part of this is that they sustain themselves, but at the same time, it has a lot to do with the platform that hosts other people's creativity and the value that those people's creativity have, and that then becomes a platform for other people's gifts to be shared, and then people to know about those people that are sharing those gifts, and then to follow them. So I really like this Saturn in the 2nd house placement, where they've really established a life that's not only what they, Saturn in Leo, want to do, but it also is a platform that essentially brings abundance to other people's creative pursuits. So it's not only just supporting his own, but it's supporting everybody else's that, are able to contribute to this library of knowledge and wealth that 3.5 million people can just go onto the internet and type in, okay, I'd like to go and read up about heavy metals and the importance of how to get rid of them, or I'm wanting to understand about this recent choice making that Donald Trump's making. And so is there a writer or somebody that's been making content about this that I can digest? And it's just really, really fascinating to see how that Pluto in the 3rd also shows up as how the platform was manifested. It was a desire to communicate with the public in a way where there was repressed news. It wasn't getting to the people that really saw deeper into reality, that needed a deeper need for life. And this structure, this slow, progressive, growing establishment has now reached this point where it truly, truly does provide such a profound level of healing, especially with that 6th house, Neptune and Mars, Sun over there. Tremendous amount of healing for so many people, because they literally just come to this platform, and it requires I suspect a fair bit of sustainability in terms of managing all the people that are on there. But I know for him, his role in that is not as chaotic as it would be for. I think he's kind of stepped into a role where other people are doing the sort of jobs, and he's kind of just directing it. So he kind of established this platform. It was his dream, and now it's in reality, and he actually lives off that as well. It's a self-sustainable organism that essentially supports him. And it's
he was destined for success. I mean, you can see a chart when obviously that Venus is in Aquarius, it's squaring the nodes, it's ruler of the South Node. Certainly in other past lives, he's lost everything and needed to be able to create his own fortune. When you look at Saturn in Leo retrograde, often in the 2nd, you can see it's like from riches to rags almost, that kind of signature where he had it all and then it was gone.
Right.
And a retrograde Saturn is a more Uranian experience, like really wanting to do something totally innovative with your life, even more so, than having, I would say even more so than having a retrograde, in other planets, to have it in Saturn as your career, as your work, it's wanting to be able to do something totally groundbreaking. And then you see the trines to those Sag planets, especially Mars, which rules as midheaven as well, in time he would make a mountain out of this thing, a
Yeah.
mountain out of a molehill in a positive way. And especially too, you can see with that Pluto, third house Pluto, forming those sextiles on either side. I mean, he had such anchoring energy to manifest something truly international, that would go all the way around the world, that everybody could have access to, full
Yeah.
freedom of the information, traveling incredibly fast, right? With a push of a button. I mean, it's amazing what technology has allowed for. So I love this example because, brick by brick, he did it on his own.
Yeah.
I'm sure he wasn't doing or wanting anything mainstream. Did he just start kind of right out of the gates and not go to
Yeah.
college or anything?
Exactly. No, I don't think out of college. I think that he was working, and then eventually uh, it was him and his partner that just said, you know what, we need to take a risk here, and we need to do this because it's what we believe to be true. It's we need a voice, and the people need a voice, and why not? Let's just start this. And eventually, from 2011 up until still 2019, it's just this huge platform that, I mean, at some point in 2014, 2015, when we were participating, because we are also associated with this person's work on their site, raising vibrations. Like I said, in 2014, 2015, articles that we were writing as a part of this were reaching up to 60,000 shares. And that experience for me to have evolutionary astrology put on that platform, because that's what essentially brought me to put EA out there in the world, was just how fast that accelerated, and how, for me, like, as in, if I just look at my own interaction with this model that was essentially established by these two people, but this is his charts of the guy that actually, it was his idea. For
I
me,
love it. I mean, it's like,
it
oh,
was,
go ahead.
pardon?
Go ahead.
I was just saying that I noticed my own interaction with this chart was, it was also a long, progressive building process. So as I interacted with this person's energy in their establishment, I also experienced indirectly, in my opinion, that Saturn second house dynamic, where to establish something that was strong and foundational came through time, and it was built through time. It wasn't. It was, to the masses, and it was deeply innovative. You can see that Saturn retrograde pointing to Uranus on the north node, and then the planetary ruler of Venus, which is squaring the nodes, is Uranus. So you can see here that this needed to be innovative in order for it to really become big, and it was, and it is at the moment still. I mean, it hosts some really influential content creators that give a lot of advice and support to a lot of people in need. That whole humanitarian event as well, with Uranus on the north node and Venus in Aquarius.
You think about this sixth house, and first of all, that Neptune trining the Saturn, it's like, this ain't no pipe dream, baby.
Yeah,
This is
yeah,
real.
exactly.
The dream becoming real, and also just the sixth house is that feeling of your karma yoga. I have a duty here to this world, to this planet. Feeling like you have Saturn and Leo, of course, you're going to already feel a special sense of destiny with the work you're doing. Trining all those planets, Sun, Mars, and Neptune, and Sag, also a fire sign, feeling that same sense of purpose, really, and passion for something so far-reaching and universal, frankly. So anyway, this is an excellent example of someone who has been able to build the dream, right?
Sure.
With partners, not on his own, but that Venus in the seventh squaring the nodes is going to be somebody who's not going to want to necessarily work alone.
Yeah.
Many minds having a different role within a small group would work well in this case.
Yeah. So I think, if that's how long have we been talking for? Like just over an hour, right?
Yeah.
An hour. I think, I don't know if you feel that if there's any closing thoughts that you have on today, or if there's other things you want to look at the other chart.
We can look quickly into this other chart.
Sure. That one over there.
This is Jane Goodall. Let me bring up the
quite a lot of stuff in Aquarius there.
And she early on did not get the funding she needed for her project. You can see that she felt very alone, and of course, she was ridiculed for not having sort of the mainstream or traditional education, and really a woman in a man's world, very much so. But if you think about her life and how simple it became, it was a life of observation that's very much Aquarius, observing the primates and the monkeys and observing them in nature. It was all about observation and living with them in this very simple reality, right?
Yep.
She needed the money for the research, not to live in some big way. She lived in nature with the animals there and with the monkeys, and the moon, of course, being in Sagittarius in the 12th, the Sag rising. But you can see how she just did things her own way. And it was very Aquarian for the time. Everybody else wanted to follow the way things had been done and wanted to judge her for the ways she went about her research. But they proved to be right. And when you're taking innovative steps in your future, she trusted her own intuition with the animals and her magic, by the way, her magic, moon in the 12th house in Sag, was about tuning into their emotional bodies, their emotional reality. Animals are pure emotion. They don't have any agenda. And she would, really disarm herself in every way possible, give them ample space and distance, continue to show up day after day, hour upon hour, year after year, observing them in nature and moving in time and space with them as if she were them. And so, I just wanted to share this example here with Jane Goodall, and also, again, seeing how she had limited resources early on, and how that's being expressed here in the chart. Do you have any thoughts about this one as you're looking?
Yeah, I was gonna ask. Do you see the significance of Neptune in the 9th house Virgo squaring the moon in the 12th Sag, and also Chiron in the 6th, and how the moon is also squaring the Venus in Aquarius, and that correlating to this intuitive knowing of healing in nature, because nature itself is inherently non-judgmental. And Virgo has, so much of this prior lifetimes of man-made wrongs, and this is what's wrong and this is not correct. And so the internalized communication. And I wonder if that was a kind of way that the soul healed itself through living in what was natural, that wasn't man-made, right?
Absolutely. I mean, coming back to Africa for her, she's spoken about, she was coming back home, and home to herself. I mean,
Exactly.
she is a daemon soul. A daemon soul are souls who have lived in harmony with plants and animals and nature. And so, this was paramount for her to not only recover herself and recover her nature, but to give voice to those who could not speak.
Right.
Chiron in the 6th in Gemini is for her to be able to speak for those wounded animals, the wounded monkeys, and to be a messenger for them, to articulate to humans and to others what they're trying to say. And so, that's what she did.
I love
with
it.
her work.
It's amazing. And I think even with Jupiter in the 10th house, maybe I'm being a little bit too far-fetching over here with Jupiter in the 10th house Libra, that there was, with trining the Saturn Venus, that she would almost be somebody that would create a bridge where she would establish a bridge between the human world and the animal kingdom. And
Yes.
through her ability to translate these different realities, so the comparing and contrasting, and being able for us to actually connect with something that we in ourselves have probably forgotten as well. Like humanity has really forgotten its connection and its roots to nature through the last 6,000 years. So for this soul to come in and hold a vibration that, when she honored her individuation process, really reminded us of something that on some level we're like feeling uncomfortable with, because we're uncertain about what it actually means. But then on another level, it's really opening us up to a dimension of reality that's, in a sense, traumatized, maybe with that Saturn North Node Venus. She really brought home something that needed to be awoken within us again.
Absolutely. And Jupiter is a wonderful example, Simon. Absolutely, she is a bridge between two worlds, human and animal world. And Jupiter is the planet of our interpretation and how we interpret
Mm-hmm.
things. Being retrograde and having Neptune retrograde, which rules her Mercury in Pisces, she has this capacity to decode and to understand things that others may not, right?
Yep.
And then to
Yep.
translate that, as you said, to others, and to document it, to change what has already been thought to be understood, using all of her years of firsthand living in the moment with these beings, proven research over time. I mean, she's in her 90s, still traveling and trying to do the work. This is Saturn in the second house, man.
Yeah.
They never stop working, ever. And so, right, a bridge, it's a beautiful
And
example of,
also the natural square that's happening between the ninth house and the 12th house, i.e. the moon and Neptune. You can see that there is also a natural sort of intuitiveness that the soul is wanting to connect within themselves. And I think that part of her journey towards nature was a healing process of connecting back with her intuition, back with her own inner cycle nature that was feminine in its process, and then in that way bringing spirit and matter together, through this deep intellect with Mercury in the third house in Pisces, and then Neptune in the ninth house Virgo, where it's not too abstract and non-linear that we can't make sense of it, but it's also at the same time well-researched, well-grounded material that allows us to digest the deeper truths that are essentially trying to emanate from Neptune in the ninth, which we know about. With Neptune in the ninth house, these are the souls that have the capacity to hear whispers from the deep unknown at an intuitive level. And some of them can believe it's from God, and other people can actually just be genuinely connected to a very profound level of abstract feminine knowledge.
right? And her personal bottom line in this life with Pluto in Cancer retrograde, like you said, to recover the feminine or the emotion,
Mm-hmm.
was to learn to trust herself first. Because clearly these are signs of betrayal,
Yeah.
learning who to trust and who not to, the system, men, patriarchy. But it starts with learning to trust herself and her own emotional knowing of what is true. Ruler moon and Sag in the 12th. And yes, to trust those whispers, to trust her inner knowing, not what she
Yeah.
believes or thinks is true, what she knows is true. That's Sagittarius. And so she came through in this way to prove it to herself first, and then to prove it to the world. This is what's true about this world, this reality, this animal species. And
Brilliant.
so, yeah, it was powerful. She's a powerful role model for women to not question herself, to not take in the doubting Thomases of the world, or those who are judging her, making her feel not enough because she didn't go through the normal normal, or the school system, the colleges, and the way that people felt were respectable. She just jumped in with both feet into a world she knew would tell her the truth and remind her what was right about what she knew was already to be true. Right? It was
Right.
nothing she had to do. It was all about rediscovering, not necessarily learning something, but rediscovering a world that she's already come from and known before, and then speaking the truth about this world instead of allowing something not to be true to exist.
Exactly.
And
Exactly. Yeah,
so anyway, she's
it's
definitely
pretty
my,
amazing how this chart really just shines up so clearly.
yeah,
Right.
she's a hero. She's a hero of mine for sure. So anyway, that was a wonderful hour and 15 minutes, I guess, today. And thank you so much, Simon, for bringing all of your knowledge and wisdom to this space for others to benefit from. And for those of you that are just listening, we do have a website available for you to learn more about evolutionary astrology, as well as our websites here, schoolofevolutionaryastrology.com. We do have a message board. You can post questions. And if you're interested in learning more about the original teachings taught by Jeff Green, there is a correspondence course available on the website and information there. So we'll be back next month to look at Saturn in the third house, or Saturn in Gemini.
Yep.
And I'll be back with some more podcasts with Ari Moshe, David Green, and Rose Marcus. Until next time, namaste.